Oh, also, I gotta turn up my desktop audio for this shit, because I turn it down for the game so that people can hear my words, but I think it... Yeah, we're... Okay, cool. We are live. We are live. And we are thriving. So, this one should be interesting. I'm gonna make sure my audio is working before I get too far into it. I think it is. For my
Yeah.
audio. All right, cool. And this one will be a discussion on the recent bullshit involving immigration, MAGA, Republicans, and the sort of kerfuffle that has occurred when you realize that the people that you've pushed in, like, to your front have been grifting and selling you lies that you have believed. This is Elon Musk and Trump, who like spent their entire campaigns campaigning on like how bad immigrants were, and now they have a bunch of audience members who hate migrants. And Vivek is a migrant. Elon Musk is a migrant. And both of these people have Actually, don't think Vivek is a migrant. I think he's a natural born, but he's the son of migrants, if I understand correctly. Either way, they don't like Indians. They don't like Mexicans coming in and stealing our jobs. And they have been sold a pack of lies about various things, including eating pets and, cannibal gangs and various other things like that that are basically pure hysteria. And there's a lot of lies. There's a lot of potential like ground that could be made. And I title this stream like an asshole again so that we can get a bunch of people in the comments. Before we do, though, we have somebody new, somebody reliable, and I'd like to start with Phil on introductions. We'll go to Rose, then I'll put my piece on the board, and we will get going based on those grounds while I share this on social media. And you both are encouraged to do that as well for the purposes of getting audience engagement.
So my name is Phil. I would probably consider myself a kind of voluntary minarchist. I think it's probably the most rational way of introducing libertarian to people, and so that might inform you on kind of what my stance is towards immigration is likely to be.
All right, Rose.
I'm Rose, your reliable patron saint of real libertarians. I'm an anarchist without adjectives. I personally think anarchism is the only rational way forward. So this should be fun.
And of course,
also tell you something about my stance on immigration. I mean, no nations. Technically, that should imply no borders, right? Or
exactly.
does it? Guess we'll see.
And that's the thing, like those of you who've been following this channel for a while, I'm your resident mentally ill furry, and I oppose borders as a concept. My debate with Liberty Hangout and Eric July is nearing a decade old, which is fucking hilarious because that was sort of one of my introductions to streaming in general, is getting involved in shit like that and dust-ups about issues. And this was one of the first issues that I went over, is immigration. And it's one of the areas that I have not exactly gotten that much different on. In fact, I've gotten worse. I have chosen to become worse. So we'll be getting going relatively soon. Before anything else, though, Phil, if you want to plug the thing with which you're involved, feel free.
Yeah, so I'm involved in kind of an inter-caucus coalition, trying to fix the LP. I think a lot of people can see that there's a disease in the LP, and I think the best way to cure that is medicine that includes all different versions of libertarian, and find a way forward, kind of together to fix the issues that kind of destroyed our party. It's LP Alliance on Twitter. We have a Discord that we have some very active and motivated activists involved in. And we would more than welcome you to come. The only rule essentially is that it's not a single issue coalition. This is there's no red lines for if you want to join. You're not going to change anything there. It's just that we all believe that if you're there, you're probably there for good faith to fix the party, and we're pretty welcoming of most people. So
Yeah, there's a pretty nasty civil war going on in the LP right now. I started out on the other side of that civil war, then eventually crossed over to the light side. It's a fun story. Maybe someday we'll have to do an entire stream on it. But for now, yes, I will echo that you should definitely join the LP Alliance and help it be retaken by real libertarians.
And before we get into anything further, you also have something to plug.
Oh, right. Yeah. You can also check out the Liberty Test podcast. It is a fairly new podcast that was started by the Libertarian Party of New York, where we take our very base platform that was rewritten last term, and then we go over current events, talk about them in the context of libertarian philosophy, and we try to relate them to our platform. It's fun. We all have fun, and you should check us out at, let's see, channel is just Libertarian Party of New York on YouTube.
And the reason I wanted to do that is because now that's very close to the beginning of the stream, and anybody who comes in who has like sort of any complaints can know that there is a large group of people who would be willing to potentially discuss these complaints with you. File a complaint with our HR department. And we will get back to you as soon as possible. But additionally, so the first thing that started all of this off, let's get that started. And we'll have a brief discussion on that. Vivek Ramaswamy saw a tweet where somebody pointed out that the majority of, or at least the majority of the businesses that were listed, because these things are always done very much selectively, had an Indian CEO. They were talking about Google, they were talking about IBM, they were talking about, and like, he took that personally for some reason. It's fine, I guess, when they're like constantly talking shit about the Jews, or when they can, make some sort of allusion to Mexicans stealing our jobs. But then when it suddenly comes to H-1B visas, which are heavy in tech and pharma, you get tech and pharma bros who are suddenly realizing that maybe the same kind of vitriol that they had ejected toward other people could be ejected at themselves. And Vivek Ramaswamy posted a lengthy reply. And let's just say he was not happy about it. And the general vibe of this reply, let me see if I can actually find it specifically.
About like mediocrity?
Yeah, like
yeah, Americans have been embracing or promoting mediocrity for. I mean, the thing is, like, yeah, a lot of it is just common sense stuff, but it was not well received.
Yeah, and this was before like January 1st, and like the basically the turn of the new year already had a giant fucking like culture war between various factions of Republicans. We're only talking about it now, but like it was already getting going. And the thing Vivek Ramaswamy specifically said, in entire quotes, I'm just going to read it because it's funny. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans, he put those quotes there, isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth in capital letters. It's always fun when they capitalize truth, because you know that when they caps lock, they mean business. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in colleges, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ, or the jock over the valedictorian, will not produce the best engineers. There's some truth to that.
It is. Like, the U.S. has been hostile to smart people for a long time. There's been nerds are frequently the butt of a joke in most U.S. media. Like, it's very true.
Yeah, and so then he gets into this, which I don't watch this shit. Let me be super clear. So I am not in a position to argue with it, but like he posts this, and people who actually know about it, like they were very clear that he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. I don't know though, but a culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World, or Zack and Slater over Screech in Saved by the Bell, or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to comment. But what I do know is that there are some people who actually posted relatively good responses containing clips from the show as proof. So I thought that was amusing. But fact. I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity, and their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competition, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chillin', more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Fucking boomer bitch.
I mean, my parents didn't have to limit those shows for me because I just reflexively hated them.
Yeah.
And by extension hated anyone who liked them when I was a kid, because I'm like, this is so stupid. I want to go do something intellectually interesting.
I liked cartoons quite a bit, as one could probably see, but I didn't like the fucking sitcoms.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, so most American parents look skeptically at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s, or even now, who raise their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we'll have our asses handed to us by China. This can be our Sputnik moment. We've awakened. Please tell me that this is real after all of the things he just said about intellectualism. He's misspelled awoken. We've awakened from slumber before, and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellence over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us, rather than wallowing in victimhood and just wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence. I'm confident we can do it, American flag emoji, American flag emoji.
Well, I mean, okay, I blame Twitter because they make you pay in order to be able to edit your posts. So if he was able to include that many characters, he, already has the paid thing anyway.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, normally I don't judge people for typos, except when they're insulting other people's intelligence. Then, because if you're going to call someone else stupid, you need to be very careful not to have obvious cell phones, like misspelling or having grammatical errors. But I mean, it's a minor error, so I'm not going to judge too hard on that one.
Yeah, but it's a minor error, which means many conservatives are very hard. Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have some feels about it. I'm in the STEM field, right? So I'm a nanoscientist by trade. And so, I mean, there's some things that are very clear where our culture prioritizes, certain fields. And I don't necessarily think that's something you can just legislate or then get involved in. It has to be a cultural shift in general, and by calling it out, and then it seems like you're shitting on people that aren't in that, instead of recognizing that even if you're not in that field or that entire job range, that you're valuable and you provide massive movement to the economy. And I think that's kind of the thing that I was the most angry about it. I think there was a wide range of people that are angry that it's it's shitting on Americans, or I was angry that it's you're shitting on one type of laborer, and then basically allowing to promote another one. And when in reality, we should want excellence for all of our laborers in this country, regardless of where they come from. At least that's my personal perspective on it in general. But I can see why people were mad if they have that idea that it's America exceptionalism, right?
So.
Oh yeah, fellow STEM person, I mean, because there was.
And what's your field, by the way?
There, what was that?
What's your field? Just so you can
Oh,
fill in.
molecular biology.
Yeah, so you and Phil can nerd out because you gotta
Yes.
have STEM competitions. Measure your stems. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is a lot of hostility, I think, towards not necessarily intelligence, but like people who, yeah, like basically towards nerds, people who would rather sit there studying than be doing stupid shit like going out and partying. Like I remember feeling like this immense pressure when I was in my early 20s to, I'm like, I was made to feel like I was abnormal because I didn't want to be out clubbing, and we were led to believe that that was normal. That's what you're supposed to want to do. And I'm like, I feel so weird. I'm like at home reading about intellectually interesting stuff, but I've been told I'm weird for this. But then when I would try to like do what I was supposed to do, like, okay, I'd try to like go to parties and hang out with people. I'm like, it was always so boring. None of the people ever wanted to do anything interesting. So like, there is some truth to this idea. Like, I think there is in some ways, a dumbing down of the culture that has been going on for decades or possibly for generations.
Well, so okay, I can see partially that, and I was one of those nerds. I was in the gifted programs, tested well on like pretty much every intelligence aptitude test, various other shit like while they were doing the football field, I was going to the Getty. Fucking anyway. So like I understand the mentality, right? And as a, as an acolyte of the Sonic franchise, I was constantly that kind of nerd that got made fun of for more than one reason. So there's lots of stuff, right? And I can see that. But at the same time, just to be clear, these nerds beckoned those jocks. They beckoned those sorts of people. And the kinds of people that were in their audiences loved that shit. They loved people like Tucker Carlson saying that we should bring back bullies after talking about the latest, liberal scourge of the week, like furries or LGBT or whatever. They love talking about how back in Generation X we wouldn't have been so soft because you would have been shoved in a locker. That's their audience. They fostered that shit. And now that shit is coming home to roost, they're like, no, but actually you have to be nice to the nerds. It's like, fucking get bent. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, now
you
that
are
you're
the problem.
For them.
Yeah.
I will say the generation after though has been pretty anti-bullying. So I don't know if it, even though if they may have like this culture, like a broader cultural perspective, that's kind of how they were in the 80s and 90s. It doesn't seem like they're raising their kids as much like that today than they were in past generations. And maybe we'll see a benefit from that at some point. I don't know.
Well, okay, but also Vivek Ramaswamy is like from 1985, and 1985 was like the very beginning of the millennial like generation. Like, well, I guess not beginning. I guess maybe like a third of the way through.
I think it started 1980 or so.
Yeah.
My sister was like, let's see, born in 84, and she's considered an elder millennial. I don't know exactly when it started.
Yeah. I think it's like 1981 or something. So like, Vivek is like he had to court those sorts of people because those were the people in his age bracket. He had to get a scholarship from the brother of George Soros, which is something he tried to pay a Wikipedia nerd to edit out of his wiki. He had to court those kinds of people his whole life. Those sorts of like older people who say that the modern generations are just, they don't get it. They don't know the value of a hard day's fuck you. And so like that's the general gist, is that these people have fostered that audience. And then let's just say this wasn't well received because of that. Because they constantly built up this image. They constantly built up this mentality that we need to put America first. We need to stop letting these migrants, migrant our migrant, you know, fucking migrant crime crisis. That was the thing Trump said because he combined the word Biden and migrant, and he said migrant crime. I like that, and I'm glad he dropped that relatively quickly because that just sounds like you're congested. It needs to blow your nose like migrant crime.
I thought that was I thought he had misspoken. He was trying to say Biden migrant and just accidentally merged the words.
Oh, that's almost certainly what he did. He almost certainly tried to save face with his blunder. So, like, let's be super clear here. Like, these people have been doing that, and Trump, because he had thrown his head in with Vivek, suddenly had to flip a bitch. He suddenly had to be like, oh, actually, no. You know, every bit of our fucking, like, our Indian tech CEO industry, they earned their place, and they're valuable. What we don't want is those low skilled migrants, you know, and all that shit. And Elon Musk, who has spent the past like fucking half a decade gradually becoming more and more anti-migrant, and who like posts whatever lies he has to about migrants and migration, who routinely and exclusively opposes them. That guy, he like now has to be like, actually, I'm an H-1B migrant, and if you don't like it, you should fuck yourself in the face. It's fucking hilarious. It's just funny.
Well, I don't think he actually
There's
believes
people
any
who-
of it.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I was gonna say, I don't
there's
think- I don't
people who
think
think it's deliberate too. Like it's a deliberate attempt to divide them. But
No, I think he just doesn't believe whatever it is, and that if he can utilize his tool of reach and controlling of narratives, that he can then gain more influence. I think that's really the method. Obviously he wants H-1B here. He's seen benefit from having it here, right? And so he doesn't want his businesses not to have them, and so he spent the last year being anti-immigrant, in general, when he's probably pretty internally pro-immigrant because he's somebody that is a capitalist and he wants to get the cheapest labor possible.
right.
And so like all across this whole thing, whether it's high skill or low skill, he probably sees a major benefit to himself from it.
Yeah, nationalism doesn't really work if you're running a huge company that's trying to get cheap labor.
Well, but and the thing is though, but he's not just trying to get cheap labor. Like Vivek is from a family of migrants, and
Well, I think we were talking about Elon.
and
right?
and Elon Musk is a migrant from a family of migrants who migrated around routinely.
Well, it's funny how quickly the conversation shifted because it was just about supposedly illegal migrants, and then it very quickly shifted to H-1B visa holders as well. Because originally the argument was we just want to deport people who came here illegally, but we have nothing against people who go through the right processes and come here illegally. But then, yeah, that turned out to be a lie because first it's the H-1B people, then yeah. So yeah, who's next after that? Like
It's a negative Overton window shift where it just keeps shifting to like more and more people being excluded is like what it seemed like.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like I think a lot of people pushing this the illegal migrant thing is kind of a foot in the door and they're actually just unhappy about immigration in the first place.
And well, and that's the thing. Like, but the people who are angry right now, the people who are angriest right now, are the people who already opposed migration as a whole, as as a part of everything, and now they're angry with the people who were posting the same kinds of shit, who were posting about floods of migrants, who were posting about replacement, who were posting about taking our jobs. Now those people are being like, yo, actually, but that might be a good thing in certain circumstances, and maybe step your game up instead of complaining about migrants, which is like what was everybody else was saying.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting turn of events with what it was, and I think Vivek, he said things that were true that pissed people off because it hurt their ego. It hurt their ego as Americans to be like, look, in certain fields, Americans might not be the best, right? And I think that made people very angry instead of being like, okay, well, critically, why? Is it something that we can change? If it's not something we change, But it just seems like it was a never-ending process of getting further and further away from where we would want it to be. Even if you were like a purely capitalist and you still had a hate towards one group, it just seems like there's like a constant shift more and more. My hope is that by saying the truth, that little bit of truth at the end of Vivek's thing, where he's like you got to get better, I hope that people would internalize that and then not internalize the let's start excluding everybody other than these really high level people.
They had to like basically admit that what they really wanted is basically affirmative action for white people, physically white dudes.
And that's the thing, like, that's when he had people coming to him with this shit. Like, Mario Nawfal posted on December fucking 27th, 2024, this video of, like, Elon Musk saying, stop trying to optimize something that shouldn't exist. And Stephen Mackey, whoever this fucking lackey is, he tweeted out, stop trying to optimize something that shouldn't exist. And then, let's optimize H1B. And Elon Musk got in his replies and said, the reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who've built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H1B. Take a big step back and fuck yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend.
I wish you would take that same level
like
of energy.
He aligned himself with the wrong people. Of course, how much of this is just all for show and how much is actually genuine? Anyway, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wish he was so fervent about just like generalized free movement of people. Like you could perceive if he actually believed some of these things that there would be like not a large jump for him to go and make the realization that like actually everybody is probably good if they can believe in their heart that people are free and that they should be, able to move and exist and they own themselves, and as long as they're welcomed somewhere and they're not causing problems, that they should be allowed to. Like that small jump there would be like a huge shift, I think, in the zeitgeist, and hopefully somebody's speaking to his ear about it, but I highly doubt it because I don't think any libertarians are actually in his ear any which way. So
not really. But that's a good place to, I think, start with. Like we can start going over some of the libertarian philosophy with regard to immigration and then try to relate that to the real world, because I think I've said this before, but I think the biggest issue with the immigration debate is this is where you see libertarians at their most theoretical, like, because we'll talk about how, like, in stateless society, obviously there'd be free movement of people, but then people get caught up on the fact that, okay, but we don't have that. We have a giant state where we have to pay taxes and where we have welfare programs and where we're forced to fund programs that we don't actually want. So, like, this fact is often used as an argument for restricting immigration. So, and like some of the arguments, like they are not necessarily wrong, or so. Yeah, I think this is why there's so much disagreement, even amongst libertarians, over what the correct answer is on immigration.
But the problem is, like, the real hate there is like the government, right? The hate should be like the state, not the people that want to come here and better their lives, right? Like,
well,
we can talk about like
it's
existing policy now. Yeah, but like I think that's like the biggest problem is that, like, instead of talking about like the policy now should not be regressive to certain people just because it's not perfect the way it is now, right? Otherwise, you might have a different intention of what you want to see in a libertarian endgame, right? Maybe you just want a covenant city where you can abuse certain people and only keep it for yourselves. That's what it seems like the justification that kind of thought line has been, at least for some people. But I surely am also of the idea that, like, we shouldn't. Somebody wants to come here. Like, my great grandparents came here. We didn't get welfare. Right, like, and we also weren't required to have some crazy amount of money to come in and be citizens, like other people have been kind of suggesting. It was we came with enough money to get by for like a month, and we struggled, and we eventually, like, our family went through many generations of struggle, success, and I feel like that process is an American process of coming here, believing in an ideal, and then struggling for the best that you can get, and just having a denial or an anti-version of immigrants in general. It just feels so different to what even if you're like a constitutionalist, like what you would believe you'd want the ideals to represent. Yeah, so it's been disheartening to see it for sure, but it's also been heartening to see kind of like a big backlash back against it. Like, look, maybe people should be allowed to come here, and then the discussion becomes, well, how do you get them here and still, while we're in this framework, protect against it? I think those are valid conversations to have, but a lot of the ones that happen are not in good faith, I don't think.
Right. I think a lot of the resentment just stems from people who are angry because we live in a hyperinflationary corporate hellscape, propped up by the state, of course, where people are living paycheck to paycheck. People are not able to save because the value of their currency is being constantly destroyed, and they're struggling to get by and to get their basic necessities met. And then there's this idea that people can just move to this country and be propped up by welfare dollars, and which may or may not be true. Most immigrants, or even if they're getting welfare at one point, it's short-lived. Most of them are a net positive, but they'll look at the edge cases of immigrants who move here and they're receiving welfare payments, and it just creates resentment. And this is deliberate. There is a concerted effort by the ruling class to constantly keep the people angry at each other and blaming their fellow member of the working class, as opposed to understanding who their actual enemies are. So again, a lot of this is just deliberately orchestrated, but that's where I think a lot of the anger stems from. People are angry because they don't have very many prospects. They can't save up for a house. They can't get ahead. And then they're looking for convenient scapegoats. And immigrants have always been an easy scapegoat for a lot of people.
Right. But also, it's even more than the scapegoating, because it's the idea that they have been convinced, not just through scapegoating, but through a campaign of otherization, that there are groups of people that they should hate, that they should be opposed to, that are replacing them, etc., etc. Whether it's the Jews, the Indians, the Mexicans, the blacks, it's always been surrounded. People who aren't that, been very specifically white people are at risk. Whites are a minority that's being persecuted despite being still the majority of the country. Whites are being replaced despite still having relatively high birth rates comparatively. It's all this stuff that you can get people to believe. Or, the straights are being replaced. Everybody's there's the spike of trans people that's not proven to really exist. And the general mentality of, we are being replaced. The people who are replacing us are fundamentally antithetical to our values. This amounts to a cultural attack and a war. We should enable the government to fight this war on our behalf. If we don't, we're going to be replaced with these scary foreigners, either culturally foreign or foreign by way of nationality and ethnicity. But because they can't handle our culture, and Western culture is a threat to their culture, so they've got to replace our culture with their culture. It's that mentality. It's always existed. And ironically, just because we've got to also mention this because of the libertarian aspect of this show, if a certain caucus really wanted to respect the mentality of their namesake, then they would be very open to the idea of free migration and trade in the form of Misesian politics. When Trump started to speak out in favor of tariffs, there were a whole bunch of people for the Mises Institute that spoke out against it and made excellent articles against it. Ryan McMakin being one of the main people I can think of. Trump had to do this because he's a xenophobic, jingoistic fascist, and so is his audience. So he had to pretend that somehow it's more libertarian to have tariffs. It's not. But the Mises Institute and Misesians know that it is anti-libertarian, and they were speaking out against it. And the Mises Caucus should have spoken out in favor of the Mises Institute's like positions. I'm not sure. I think I might have misspoken just now, but like whatever. The Mises Institute should have like been jibing with the Mises Caucus because the Mises Institute was being Misesian, but the Mises Caucus was not. Instead, they enabled the Trump campaign and then went immediately to defense for it, saying that, oh, but tariffs would be awesome if they got rid of the income tax, a thing they never did and were never planning on doing.
Yeah, okay, but why are you being such an autistic purist who's addicted to losing?
Yeah,
You gotta
exactly.
make some concessions. Why are you defending the income tax? Okay, what if, okay, Trump said that he'd replace income tax with tariffs. So by casting doubt on this, it means you're defending the income tax.
Uh-huh.
This is incrementalism, by the way.
These are actual arguments I
this is-
constantly see, by the way,
Yeah.
from
I mean,
people who claim to be part of the Mises Caucus.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, I brought up all that, and I'll shut up for a bit because I've been speaking for a hot minute now. But like the general gist of my idea here is that they have directly courted the kind of shit that is now biting them in the ass. Like the fact that libertarians had to grovel back toward the MAGA camp and say, please come back. We don't all believe that, like, the 3.4, we don't all believe that platform plank. That's entirely because they had to cuck and cater to these sorts of people to get any traction with the Trump camp, because that's who the Trump camp is. They're people who like say that we should put tariffs on China while wearing MAGA hats that were made in China. They're people who like say that we should bar immigration while like having H-1B people all over the companies that are associated with those in charge. They're people who say that we hate migrants, and then when the migrants that run the joint suddenly start piping up, they're like, hey, shut up, migrant. That's who these people are, you know? I don't know. It's I don't know how much there is to respond to that with, but
No, I mean I can respond to the tariff one specifically because it's a kind of a free trade and free labor movement kind of still connected. You know, this idea that like we need to produce everything in the United States only is kind of like an insane take for me, right? Like every country is going to have something that they are better at, that they can produce faster, cheaper, and do it. And like, yes, you could bring it here, but it's going to end up being more expensive in the long run. And so I really look at it like people already kind of intuitively understand this. Like if you want to enjoy some fast food or something, right? Like you're going to go out of your home, your own little home section to be like, I want to go get a McDonald's burger. They're going to make it fast, cheap, exactly what I want, and tasty. And it's like when you were a kid, when they said, well, we got McDonald's at home, and it's like, it takes more time. It's more annoying to prepare. Might not be as tasty as you wanted it to be. And I think those like intuitive relationships, like you kind of have to extend that out to the overall broader market outside of just like a nation state where you're like, look, this other country has the McDonald's, and yeah, we might be able to make a burger at home, but maybe it's not going to be like McDonald's, and I want McDonald's, right? Like I think that's the kind of a generalized like real world everyday take that wouldn't seem crazy, but other people think it's crazy when it's outside of national borders.
Right. So I think so I think we should start like from like the basics of like what we as libertarians believe. Like, so in an ideal society, most property that's been, you know, homesteaded and developed would be considered privately owned. So therefore, like if I want to hire someone, it should not matter where they come from. Like I should be able to invite anyone I want onto my property. So national borders are an artificial idea because the entire issue, like the entire idea of nations is an artificial idea that's just backed up by some massive criminal gang that is the state arbitrarily deciding, oh, there's a line here, and we've decided that certain people cannot cross it, so therefore you can't associate with this person who lives on the other side of that line who wants to come and work for you or wants to come and join your community or something like that. So to try to steelman the closed border libertarian argument, like the argument they usually give is that, okay, but we don't live in an ideal libertarian society where all property is private. we live under a state where we have so-called public property, which really just means taxpayer-funded property. Like, we're all extorted for a certain amount of the money we make. This money is then taken and used to build things like public parks and other public areas. And then, so, like, at the very least, we can consider this to be, like, we should try to treat it as an approximation of our private property that we all jointly own. So, for example, if we've all paid into this so-called public property and then someone else comes in who has not paid into it and can start using this property, then that should be considered an act of aggression because they have not paid into it, but then suddenly they can start using it. Like, that seems unfair if you're taking their arguments, like if you're going along with their arguments. And like, there is in some way something to that. Like, for example, if I've paid to use, like if I've been forced to fund a public park, someone who's from out of town who has not paid into it, like, should they have the same right to go use it as I do? And it's the same thing with like welfare programs. If I've been forced to pay into a state-run welfare program my whole life, and then someone who is not from here and has not paid into it is allowed to move here and then receive payments out of that fund, like, that's kind of unfair to the people who have been forced to fund it. So then this is where a lot of the resentment is coming from, and this is where a lot of the closed borders from alleged libertarians are coming from. This idea that, okay, we do not live in our ideal society, and therefore open borders are not something we can do until we no longer have, for example, a welfare state. Like, they're not necessarily wrong. Now, I think closing the border is the wrong answer because I think that would just require growing the size of the state even further, and that always backfires. And anyone who argues otherwise is clearly just ignoring history. Okay, like, we try to grow the size of Border Patrol, that's eventually going to be used against you in the same way that every other government program that was supposedly for security eventually gets turned on the citizens. But, like, they're not necessarily wrong in their arguments. I just think they're misguided.
So my first argument is that the point of parks isn't so that people who like paid into a community can use those parks. If it is, then like how would that scale? And so I know you're steel manning, so I'm like directly responding to your steel man. How would that scale? Would somebody who paid $1 in taxes be allotted the same amount of time in the park as somebody who's been like paying like, you know, out of their mansion that they have in the corner of town, like a ton of property tax? Could the rich people kick out the poor people out of that park?
Right. Like, I'd say they own a smaller share of it, but yeah, because not everyone pays the same amount. So yeah. Yeah, the question is, yeah, should people have more right to the park than others if we're all being forcibly taxed to pay for it through no, you know, without our consent?
And like, I would argue no, because that's not the point of a park. The point of a park is that there's like one part of town that people can access that lets them socialize and enjoy their time together, and also that like people from out of town can also use for similar reasons, in order to interact with towns that they, you know, aren't a member of. The whole point of public spaces is for the public. It's not for specific members of the privacy.
But what if they're destroying, like, what if people from out of town who have not paid into the park are then coming there and trashing things and breaking stuff that we had to pay for? Like, is that fair to the people who had to pay?
What if people from the town who like paid for it are doing that? What if somebody who comes from a poor family who already can't afford to repair does like some sort of damage to the place? Does the rich person then get to extort them for money because the amount that they've paid into it was greater, so they lost a greater share of their money?
Which is precisely why these things should be private. And if you want to pay into it and use the park, you should. Otherwise, you should be able to be exempt from it.
Or
because
they should.
Then you could have simple rules like if you break something, you have to help fix it or pay for the repairs.
Or they should be communal.
It's harder, like, yeah, it's a lot harder when, like, people are being essentially robbed to pay for something, because, like, the counter argument to the Steelman I just gave you was that, like, okay, we've all been robbed basically at gunpoint to pay for something, but the fact that you've been robbed and are a victim of a robbery doesn't mean you can dictate how other robbery victims are allowed to use the property they were forced to fund, and also doesn't mean that you now can dictate, like, how other people can use resources.
Also, if you go,
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I look at it like outside of a park scenario. Like, the states are kind of viewed as, or originally were viewed as somewhat like independent countries within the nation, right? And if there's something that's shared even between those, right, like a highway, like, are you going to now say, like, oh, the person in Maine can't drive on a road into New Hampshire or into Massachusetts or anything like that? When if the original social contract that we may not have agreed to was designed as something that was going to be utilized for basically everybody across kind of distinguishing lines, then it's like, okay. And then if we're going to remove that kind of implicit contract that we didn't agree to, the only way we should be replacing it is by then selling off assets into private ownership. And then those things can be defined around, how they would be managed, who could utilize them, or whatever. Right. And so I'm somebody who I think I'm pretty much a voluntary minarchist, where you think you should be able to pay into these commons if you want to. But then you shouldn't then have also like a right to restrict people from it. Like, it's like, if you're going to pay into them, great. If not, oh well. And then if the voluntary government essentially does good enough, you continue to help fund it. And then if you choose not to, right? If they start to fail, like with the pothole situation or like a highway that's over tolling, you go, okay, well, now you've kind of violated the contract we've made, and then move out from it. But I think that would allow people to check out from it, to say, no, don't steal from me, but then also give space for people that really believe in the idea of commons, to have room, right? And again, I want to be clear that these ideas towards this are not also like a coalition idea. These are personal ideas, and I don't plan to push them on anybody else specifically. I think I should probably clarify that now. For the anarchists that are like, oh, I don't want this person to represent me, I don't want my ideas to represent you. So,
well, as we can see, we're all coalition members, and we all have vastly different ideas. So, yeah, come and join us. You're allowed to disagree.
Although I am going to need Kareem to, actually activate stuff. I've been messaging him about that, and he hasn't done that. If he doesn't do that soon, I'm probably going to boot him, because taking up screen real estate and not, saying anything is not really cool.
Well, is that an encroachment? I mean, we've all put labor into this stream, and he hasn't. Why should he get to occupy space that we've put work into, and he hasn't?
Yeah, right? But the general
work into digital bandwidth.
Oh, there you are.
Now I think I actually got it working. I had to update a sound card.
Okay, now you've put a small amount of the same amount of labor that we have into the stream. So how much of it do you own? Do you actually get to own that whole square?
Well, it's a worker self-management industry, so let's convene. We can have an executive officer for the week, and we'll do direct democracy and come up with a consensus, and then ratify that in another meeting.
So that's the thing. I think so. Let's take this then to another conclusion. Let's talk about not just the commons in terms of fun places to play or hang out or whatever in the form of parks, and let's talk about cops.
Oh boy.
If the public funding argument and the public extortion argument means that you have got ownership over those territories, over that part of the thing that has been controlled by the government and funded by the thing that the government has taken from you, let's be super clear that also applies to the cops. Which means that the cops are your cops. If you're a rich person and you've paid more into the policing system, you now own the police and you have to own their actions. You then have to be complicit in their actions as a part of the enforcement mechanism for your capital enforcement society. And anything those cops do is acting at your representation. Anything those cops do, if they no-knock raid a house, and it's not the right house, if they victimize somebody who was not an actual criminal, because no victim, no crime, you own those cops. Those are your cops in the same way that the park is your park. So you now are responsible for paying for what those cops did. They don't have to pay for shit because they're just part of your system. So in doing so, in making this sort of ownership society of basically oligarchs, they then own the actions of the people that are employed by it, the people who are part of the apparatus. In the same way, troops are the world police for the American mechanism. And so they also own those troops. Feds, they own the feds too. The rich people who are paying the vast majority of taxes, or, to put it in an ANCAP way, having the vast majority of taxes stolen from them, are then owners of the feds, the troops, the cops, everybody who is part of this structure, because they also own the parks. It doesn't just end at parks. There's no reason it should. So, in that vein, if a cop commits police brutality, it should be okay to extort a rich person for enough money to pay back the victim, because that cop is also acting in defense of the rich person. They will come to defend that rich person's property, probably over the poor people's property if they have a call at the same time. They will be in those rich people's neighborhoods, like taking out the riffraff and policing the public areas, because we can't have riffraff on these public areas. These public areas are like paid for by these nice benefactor rich people who like fund the society. And in doing so, in creating this basic oligarchy where the people who are extorted the most get the most percentage of control and ownership over the resources that are considered public, private, whatever you have, they also then own the responsibility for what those people do who are under their employ, if we're going to consider it employment, which means that those people are then responsible for a vast majority of the things that they then complain about in terms of the government. The bureaucracy damaged somebody? Well, it's your bureaucracy, oligarchs. You should have to pay for that damage. The regulators close somebody's business, you should have to pay to reopen it. Things like that. It's not just parks. If they're going to claim ownership over the public, over the commons, because they were extorted for it, then they also own all of the actions that they claim are just some externalized entity of socialists. They are accepting responsibility for the framework that they call socialist without any of the... It's like the old saying that they're capitalizing profits and socializing losses. It's bullshit bitch behavior from people who don't want to take their ideas to their logical conclusion.
Maybe. I mean, cops they exist to be the enforcement arm of the state. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to protect rich people's property over poor people's property because rich people have the power to make things happen. They tend to be politically connected. So if a cop fails to protect their mansions from a riot or something, or they have the ability to go to town hall and bitch about it and make something bad happen to that cop. Poor people generally don't have that ability. But yeah.
See, that's the thing. When I throw monkey wrenches into because you steelman them pretty effectively, but even through their steelman, even through the best representation of their argument, the enforcement arm of the state is no different from the recreation arm of the state. If we're going to say that the parks have been created as a recreational arm of the state and that they extort people to pay for those parks, and that's why neighboring towns or countries shouldn't be able to use those parks without permission and funding, that's a good way to say that I own those parks. I am part owner of those parks because of the way my money has been spent on those parks, regardless of my consent. Therefore, it still applies to the cops. It still applies to the troops. It still applies to all of the things that they have been forced to fund.
Well, it kind of does, though. In theory, the cops, but here's the issue. Forced to fund them, they should, at the very, minimum, protect you and your property. But, of course, we know they don't actually do that because, again, they're just the enforcement arm of the state, and their primary purpose is to generate revenue for the state. It's why they care a lot more about setting things like speed traps than, say, investigating your property that was stolen or some non-politically connected person that got murdered or something.
Yeah.
Because the things take resources and have very little payoff. But if you can give out speeding tickets, yeah, that generates money for the state.
I think what this largely comes down to, right, is like the transition between if we're thinking about going from our current system to the next one, and how does that actually happen, right? Because you're not wrong, Jeremy, that the idea that like if you want to own the good things, you're going to have to also then own up to the bad things that were there too.
Yep.
Or you could just say that like the social contract that existed prior was not right. And then how are we going to move into this era of where actually it becomes mostly personal ownership, right? And then you would own your personal actions, and how those things get figured out, it'll probably be multifaceted, right? But those are things that we probably shouldn't be focusing on the majority right now. We should probably be just focusing on, removing and pushing things in that direction while basing kind of the motion there on the kind of philosophical principles that have been described, right? That we shouldn't be fighting so much about it right now when it's very clear the only way you can keep your current position of being like a hardcore bordertarian or kind of partial ownertarian, maybe is another term for it, is that you probably won't get very much of things because the other rich people probably funded it, and then also that there's going to be some proportionality to the ownership of all the horrible things that as libertarians we don't sign our names next to the duopoly because we don't want to sign our names next to the actions, right? And so you can't just pick the good and then sign your name to that, and then pick your bad and not sign your name to that, right?
Yeah, we could go with a real world example though. There is something like, because I used to think, okay, well, if you're going to have police in an ANCAP state, it's basically going to be police hut versus MIC police, and it's not actually what I see. Now, Detroit. Now, this isn't a perfect example because we don't live in a perfect world, but
well, also Detroit threat management systems is corrupt because of things that Lily Forrester revealed. But go ahead.
Okay, it is, but it's still better than your average police department, and they haven't killed anybody that I know of. They haven't had any major incidents, and it's not just for rich people. That being said, I'm not against community policing. I'm not against using Ademo Friedman, I think his name is, wanted to do police the police and come up with different ways to secure it. So I don't think there's one solution for libertarians to say, okay, maybe in West Virginia you don't need cops because it's that rural. You'd be fine without them. Maybe in New York you want private police. Maybe in towns that are suburban, you could get away with community policing like the Black Panthers. And I think that would make sense, as opposed to saying, well, here's a one size fits all for security and how we do that. Because it generally doesn't, especially in a pan-anarchist world, or if we're doing different forms of anarchy or even looking at that would work. I'm not saying that threat management's perfect. Del Brown has a lot of problems. They have a lot of problems. I don't know how bad the corruption is, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right. Yeah. I think you'd have some communities where, they do a neighborhood watch type system. Then you have people who just prefer to hire private security guards. Like, I think private security guards would be preferable if, for example, they can be fired if they don't properly do their job at protecting the people they were tasked with protecting, and they they abuse their power and violate people's rights. They could actually be fired and sued, because the issue with the state monopoly on the issue with having the state have the monopoly on the initiation of force and having one size fits all police force is that they're unaccountable. They violate your rights. Good luck effectively suing them and getting any real recourse. And if you do, it just comes out of taxpayer dollars anyway. So it's not like the actual cop is facing consequences. But you might get a payout from the city and by extension from the taxpayers, and that's about it.
But that's the way it should be. Like, it's their cops. It's their attack dogs, and they attacked somebody.
Yes and no. They did not necessarily want them.
Okay, they didn't necessarily want the park, or they wouldn't be bitching about it being built.
I didn't want the park either, but if I'm forced to pay for it, shouldn't I at least be able to enjoy it?
Yes, again, I think this is a post and pre kind of transition is kind of the key distinction in these kind of ideas. I think if you are in a point where you're hiring a police force and they happen to go out and violate other people's rights, then that becomes a much harder question, right? Is it solely based on that individual, or is it only based the person that hired them if they gave them a directive, right? That they say, here's a directive, you are to, let's say it's in a city and there's a bunch of commons that everybody agreed to fund, right? And then a group of the people in that area said, we're also going to fund a commons police force. As long as the directive from the top isn't, hey, we must abuse rights, we must violate these laws, then I think it becomes down to an individual one. But it's also then they have a responsibility of, as soon as they know abuse is happening, if they let those sort of things just foster, then that becomes another question, because it's like implicitly saying this is what you want, to abuse certain people over others.
Well, additionally, the other half of that is, see, the thing is, like, this is heritage of property conversations. The current, like, richest people who pay for the most of these properties and lands are participating in the state. They are helping the state do what it does. So the vast majority of the funding of these parks goes to those people. And if we didn't completely upend the monetary system and completely redistribute property from, here forward, the people who currently have the most property are the people who worked with the system the most, which means that the richest people, the people who benefited and served the state the most, would be, if these lands were bought, if the parks were, for instance, bought by people who claimed to own the property after they bought them, in order to transition to a new society, the people who currently have the money are the people who made shit this way. So it wouldn't be a difference in ownership. It wouldn't be like a change in justice. It would just be a more direct way for these people to exclude people from land that they unjustly acquired. So like in the like nobody like asks how we get there from here in terms of like getting to the ideal society without cementing the legacies of the people who got us here. That's the reason a lot of the time anarcho-capitalists are lumped in with fascists and a variety of other right-wing authoritarians in a lot of like anarchist discourse and leftist discourse as well, because they're not asking questions like this. They're not asking why some rich fuck who currently has the money for all of this shit to begin with should be able to buy the parks, should be able to then own the parks, or if that person wasn't able to buy the parks, who would be able to buy the park so that it has like private ownership, that has the resources to exchange for the park, that wasn't already wealthy from participation in the system that made the original park. There's no actual like logical line that can be drawn from the conclusion that the park should not have been funded the way it was, that says that the people who like made the system that created that funding model should be able to continue that park ownership for their own purposes. There's nothing there that actually ethically connects. It just sounds good on like the initial surface paper.
Well, I mean, if the state were to be abolished, what should happen, and I get, yeah, okay, what should happen and what does happen are often very different things, but like the people who funded it should all be basically part owners unless they would wish to sell their share. At the very least, we should be reimbursed for the share of the park that we supposedly owned when we were forced to pay for it.
You mean
of course that's not really how it works, because and so many libertarians also make this mistake. Like they'll argue for privatization, not realizing, because they'll confuse privatization with free markets when they're often very different things. What frequently happens when the state starts losing its grip on power and starts selling off its assets is that they'll take assets that people were forced to fund and they'll just sell them off to some rich person who was politically connected with no recourse or like money that goes back to the people who had to pay for it in the first place. So then people are getting fucked over twice. First, they're robbed to pay for a park they didn't even want. Then that park is sold off to some rich asshole. So now they have to pay to use that park that they already paid for when it used to at least be free in that their tax dollars were paying for it.
Well,
should there be a distinction on rich asshole between like, did you buy the state mechanisms to make you wealthy or not?
well,
Right? I think
yeah.
that becomes
what percentage of them didn't?
I mean, I'm sure there are plenty that didn't. Like
What percentage of them? It's low
Like
as fuck.
singers and professional
Well, it depends.
athletes
Like, right?
and
Like
stuff.
doctors and lawyers are going to end up paying much more in their taxes, but they didn't necessarily lobby the government, right? They didn't necessarily lobby favors or
You don't need to
distinctions.
lobby in order to get part of the system in your favor.
Well, no, but again, I think existing within a system and kind of taking advantage of it without trying to be the one to implement it is two different evils.
How
right?
are you not implementing it if you're taking advantage of it?
If you're not the one that helped guide the policy to give you and your class a benefit, right, in general, I would imagine that's not the same culpability.
Why?
Right?
If you're the one creating the business models that fund these things, then you're the lifeblood of them. Why do you need
No,
to be
I'm saying,
a
let's
stuffy
say-
suit in a legislative office?
Well, it's not the legislator that does it. It's like if a corporation was involved in the process. Let's say some major business owner was involved in like let's write a law that makes sure, again, the idea that we are going to kind of popularize and distribute the losses, but then guarantee their wins. If you are directly involved in benefiting from that and you are conscious of it, right? Because I think intent needs to be here, right? If there's intent that says, I know this exists, I'm going to take advantage of it, I look at it differently as like a higher level of evil than some lawyer sitting in a lab, like an office somewhere that happened
Lawyer
to get
in
a
a
higher
lab.
pay.
I like that. But like
a lawyer and
A lawyer in an office, my fault. Yeah.
But yeah, but that's the thing. I could see it maybe on a different level, but it's all the same field. So
it's not for a prescription for how to distribute at the end. It's just saying that I don't think those people that did that should ever be allowed to say, I get to buy this out, right? Like if you were somebody that designed it, like let's say you were somebody that guaranteed policy change, you should have no right to then be like, I'm going to buy this from all the poor people that only put in 2% of it, right? When they specifically had it set up a certain way to give them the benefit to make them rich alone. Right?
But the lawyers rely on the legal system in order to get their benefit, in order to get their cut. The doctors rely on a fundamentally corrupt, like, pharmaceutical and medical industry in order to get their cut. There's a huge amount of corruption in the medical industry, especially. Like, anybody who wants to can watch Sicko, a Michael Moore documentary, for free on YouTube now. He released it because he was mentioned in Luigi Mangioni's manifesto, and he was like, fuck you, I'm just going to release my documentary. So he did that. It's on YouTube now. We watched it in the cult the other day. And like anybody who wants to know just how corrupt and evil and statist the insurance companies are can watch that. And it's basically the same thing as it used to be. So the doctors themselves are profiting from the fucking structure.
Yeah, but they know about it. They have intent of it, right? Like they know and they have the intent of it. They
like,
know
is
that
there
it
a
happened.
difference
And they're
between
doing
like
it.
I think we don't
Here's the
blame
problem,
the CEO who like lobbies for regulations, or like one of these corporate higher ups who lobbies for regulations that they know will grant them either a monopoly or a quasi-monopoly, by making it impossible for anyone else to enter the market and making it so that people have to buy their product because then they can do whatever they want. Like, for example, implement an AI to automatically get them out of having to fulfill their contractual obligations.
Yeah.
Well,
but here's an issue.
Someone who gets a job with that company that they know is corrupt, but like, I mean, it's the no ethical consumption under capitalism idea. Like,
but here's a big problem.
Do business at all if every organism, if practically every field has been corrupted in some way, in the same way that like you just can't buy anything if you're trying to avoid buying from unethical companies.
But you can buy stuff. Here's the thing. It's not buying stuff. We can buy stuff. We can't own property. And what I mean by own property is not a house. Like, actually, I had to listen to it. It had to be said and be like, okay.
You're talking about productive property, I assume?
Yes, correct. Like, here's the issue. It's like, if you look at every self-made billionaire, aside from Satoshi Nakamoto, because we don't know his identity, and Roger Ver, I'll give those two hall pass.
But not Taylor Swift.
No, because Taylor Swift, you look at Taylor Swift, her dad and her mom were investment bankers. So it's like, okay.
I didn't actually know that. I didn't know anything about her. I just know people have cited her as a self-made billionaire.
Yeah, she said, I mean, like, okay, I'm not saying she didn't do any work. She did a lot, but like when your mom and dad can afford, like, let's just move to Nashville. No problem. All right, here's a house. Boom. And you have all these people who are supposedly in the capitalist free market. What they do is they invest, as Chris says, they invest money from the capitalist corporations into the corporatist corporations. It's almost you can't win because Bill Gates, his dad, his parents were like super, super important lawyers. So you're like, okay, if you're on a factory floor every day, what chance do you have to compete with this? And that's one thing I used to say. I'm like, it's all corporatism. Corporatism's bad. It's just lobbying people. And I'm not saying you can't get ahead or buy something, but really the like owners, like you can do what you want to do, but like you're not going to get up to Larry Fink level. You're not going to get up to Elon Musk level, probably. Maybe if you get lucky, something happens. But let's be honest, the table is really, really rigged where they just say, oh, yeah, just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. But if you're on a factory floor, it's virtually impossible to get to that. You can get to management. You can make some money. Don't get me wrong. You can buy some stuff. You can even have maybe a half decent life. You know, I'm not completely complaining. And some of their innovations do help. Obviously, the Industrial Revolution helped. Some of their innovations do help social welfare.
Boo and Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, well, we're using computers, so I don't know what Uncle Ted would say.
And I stab mine at night as a form of ritual. Go ahead, though. Sorry.
And then you play Steam games on it. So
hey, I also play GOG and a bunch of other shit.
Yeah, you're making a Steam game. Mr. Dapperton can review your game, see if you like it.
I welcome that.
I'm gonna laugh so hard if he sends his own audience members. All like
he should. I hope he does.
Are you gonna cry about review bombing every day on Twitter if he does that?
I'm gonna laugh. It'll be funny.
But yeah.
And just does he not realize that by responding the way he did, he's just encouraging people because then it becomes funny. Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry to sidetrack this.
And specifically Taylor Swift, like fucking her dad established something literally called Swift Group through Merrill Lynch, and fucking her mom was Andrea Gardner Swift, and like mutual fund marketer. Like they were both big business.
Something new every day.
They were both, and that's the thing. Like, see,
people say she's self-made, but yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as a self-made billionaire. I think that's an idea that's kept out there, like to convince people that if you work hard, you too can be Taylor Swift.
Justifying an ideology of cultural representation. You can have a place in our system and not get executed.
Yeah, literally, I love that meme. It's like, what the hell is a self-made billionaire? Did you exploit all the workers by yourself?
In Franco in chat, by the way, the only messages so far comes from Franco. Recent sub. Hello again. 1979 in Nicaragua, the revolutionary government defended, in quotes, not really revolutionary, that revolutionary anyway, defended North American properties, land, industries. Even Castro said Nicaragua won't be a new Cuba, but a new Nicaragua, meaning no expropriations because of the non-aggression agreements. So North American property, even out of the frontier, is very respected. So it's like you've like all of these people like still basically do the same shit to fund the same kind of shit. Like that's the thing. Look, if we had a completely ethical society for the last, let's say, century, and there were multiple generations of people who had to earn their way in a completely non-statist way, that'd be one thing. We don't even have 40 acres and a mule from back in slave days. The blacks don't have what they were owed by the government who even promised it to them. And now it's to the point where if a disaster happens with the water in Flint, Michigan, it's still fucked and it's been like a decade. And where if there's a disaster that happens in California, for instance, it can burn for fucking 800 years before it gets 6% contained. So, is
it 6% finally?
Oh, I don't.
It was 0%. Just last time I checked. Still,
the last time I checked, it was the Palisades. At least was 6%. I can actually check on that. The deal though is
there's no real there's no accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, and like, you know, the thing is, when it comes down to it, these people have built this system and they love this system. They're patriotic to this system. You'll never find somebody more patriotic than a millionaire or a billionaire. Um, they love this shit, and then they constantly blame some, secondary group for how, Hearst Fire is 95% containment, Eaton is 27, and Palisades is 13. Those are DEI containment numbers, though, so we have to ignore them and blame blacks and LGBT.
Oh yeah, because I mean, I'd rather just like if there's a firefighter shortage, I'd rather just not have any firefighters than have it be a black lesbian coming to rescue me.
Oh no, them
Yeah.
queers are gonna put out my house fire.
I don't even understand what the complaint even was.
Well, really, they're just upset that the people that they normally call flaming might be the one to put theirs out. So the general
And the Mexican fire department, because them immigrants we gotta send back that are doing all the crimes. It's like, get rid of the Mexicans. It's like, Mexico sent firefighters here. It's like,
oh no,
Yeah.
oh no, those
How
are
embarrassing.
migrant firefighters. So
migrant.
yeah,
Oh, so they're bi. They like both men and women.
they like both countries. So the general issue is that, like, this is the way I see it. I see it that they're trying to benefit from a system and grow that system that they from which they benefit, and then after they do that, they're like, "Fuck y'all! I'm pulling the ladder up from under me, and you can't even sit in the park because you're too poor and you didn't pay into it." It's bullshit.
Oh, so maybe I should be clarifying about what my position was on that. I think that I was saying, like, what is a defining factor that if you are going to divide up the property based on input into it, that some people should be precluded from having that ownership at all that they put in, right? Like if you abuse the system to gain your wealth in general, like let's say some billionaire puts $1,000 into a park and some poor person puts $1,000 into a park, and that billionaire got his billions by lobbying the state, that $1,000 should not be weighted anywhere near the same weight as somebody that basically was destroyed by the system that we've had currently, right? And so I think there should be some precluding lines of like, what are people that are not allowed to benefit from this transition to a more personal property owned process.
What poor person put $1,000 into a park?
Over their lifetime, they guarantee you they put it in, like, right, from taxes, local taxes, and everything like that. There's tons of people
Really
that would put in that same amount.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Poor
idea how
people.
much I pay in property taxes?
So much comes out of even like just
What
local
percent-
taxes in general.
What percentage of those local taxes, including property, go to parks? Tiny, minuscule.
Yeah, but over your life, you're going to end up paying in $1,000. I think just don't even use the number, any number. It could be $5 into it.
Okay,
Just look at the value that you're putting in. Whose value becomes no longer valid because the way they got that value.
So that
was through,
person
like,
who
very fucked up means.
So that person who paid $5, that person gets like a single blade of grass when they do the buyout.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm comparing it directly to
You
a
get
$5 from a
one
billionaire,
swing at the park.
right? I'm not comparing it to the overall percentage ownership. I'm saying
You just pull up
in
like
apples to apples.
you just pull up like a teaspoon of the sand. You're like, here you go,
Yes.
fucking Billy. Like, it sucks. This part of the discussion sucks because, like, it shouldn't be proportion based on that. It should be that this park could be returned and given to a commons so that the people who rely on that park for their sense of community and enjoyment can still do that, no matter whether they're poor or not. Because
I mean, I'm a minarchist. You're speaking to me, right? Like, I think that's probably like what you don't realize is that, like, that's obviously what I think people should be able to do, and they should be able to opt out of paying for it, right? Like, that's kind of what I view in general. But I'm saying if you're trying to make a transition from one to the other, there should be some like set, like, no, you can't have just survived and became wealthy because of statism and then be able to then buy up all the property that poor people have basically been put downtrodden, so your statism and riches can basically make you the power brokers in that scenario, right?
well, okay,
Right, no, I think we actually completely agree on that. Like, I mean, we may differ, like, if whether, like, you should have a small state that owns the park versus a community that owns the park collectively, or a
That's what I
private
would say.
individual builds the park and charges an admission fee. But the thing is, yeah, I feel like anarchists and minarchists often frequently believe the same things. We just kind of differ on definitions. Like, okay, is that a government versus a community that's voluntary? Or, yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
But here's the issue.
oh,
The issue I would say is that minarchy or the founding fathers were pretty much minarchists, classical liberals. I think those two are really, really close.
Yeah.
some, the ones that weren't genociding and enslaving, which were like most, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, okay.
True.
In theory, if you ask constitutionalists, the guys that like have it as their profile picture or whatever, and then they're like, I love me some Jefferson and Washington, and this is America.
They jack it to Jackson.
Yeah. So I said, okay, fine. What do you? They said we need a federal government, but they should just do military, courts, police, and fix the highways and taxes. And I'm like, yeah, but we had that, and then like less than 200 years, we got this.
Hey, the very things they need to seize more power.
Hey, you mean Britain, less than 20, dude? Like Whiskey Rebellion, crushing of various shit that came up. Fucking, it's been like this from the beginning because they were never.
They started seizing things off of ships,
and the UK had the Magna Carta,
claiming that it was like stolen. Yeah, basically they started practicing civil asset forfeiture just about immediately
because they owed the French and Dutch money, and they were already cucked to them. Like, oh, Independence Day, go fuck yourself, sit on my independence, bitch.
Well, is it because the Constitution did not, very specify very well that an individual can secede from the government in general, that they can claim that the self-ownership is what is invalid if they choose it not to be, right? I think that's like probably the main fault that happened with the Constitution in general, is that it still said that people were going to be beholden to something by force, right? And so I think that's probably why, when I've been describing myself as a minarchist lately, it's been like a voluntary minarchist that you can check out of that if you want to. And I think that stops a lot of the abuses from growing into this like ever balloon that we see today from where it started. Is if there is a checkout mechanism, like, look, you're dropping bombs on children, and I'm not giving you money anymore. And, and I only gave you money even though you have no authority over my life because I thought you were doing a good job, right? And now you're no longer doing that. So I think that would probably be the reason why most people would criticize the Constitution, but maybe I'm wrong in that assumption.
Well, have you read Lysander Spooner?
No, man, I don't read any libertarian philosophy basically at all.
I would advise you read Lysander Spooner's No Treason. I think you would dig it, maybe.
I went through a constitutional minarchist phase. And yeah, Lysander Spooner brought me out of it because I could not refute what he said in No Treason.
Yeah, and the UK is another example. Small government, Magna Carta. John Locke was pretty based. I think it was based.
No, but go ahead.
I mean, at least he questioned the fact that, you can't just say, hey, God said I'm the king, so I'm the king. God said so. Like, where? It says somewhere.
You should read Rothbard's critiques of Locke at some point. He's got good ponts of it. Go ahead, though.
Yeah, I get it, but UK, supposedly Magna Carta. So now it's like, hey, I posted the wrong meme. Keir Starmer is going to send police after me. Australia also had a small government. Technically, China had a small government in...
Australia had a small government in name, but they were a penal colony. That's kind of... I mean, when you're a prisoner, you kind of have, a giant government.
I mean, I get it, but, at the end of the day, all these governments were supposedly small governments. That's what minarchists say. Oh, you can't have anarchy. You got to have small government.
On paper, they were.
On paper, yes. As Chris would say. Oh, well, yeah, okay. The extent that they can be written down is not to the extent that they won't enforce things. So, yes, everything was written down on paper. It looked pretty. They had, but the government was only supposed to do, I want to say 4 or 5 functions at most, and now they are completely massive. It's kind of funny. All the supposed Marxist governments fizzled out so quickly because they were so bad, and they did not have the chance to grow like these ones did. It almost seems these ones take the money from the free market and grow to extreme lengths. So where it's like, oh my God, now how do you even put the genie back in the bottle? Can you?
Well, or there was never a free market to begin with.
whatever you would call it, where it wasn't as restrictive.
I would call it.
I mean, bartering era was pretty free trade, right? When we were just trading materials for materials.
Yeah.
But that was still barter under the protectorate of the tribe or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, there was
always state money monopolies, so yeah, can't really have a free market if you have state money monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we had even bartering in like this country, like during the expansion, right, where like people would trade goods for services all the time, and right, I think that would probably be the most ethical way forward. But you need some sort of transacting of labor, and somehow, right, whether it be direct or not. But yeah, I would say those are probably the closest to free markets we've ever seen, and usually they went pretty well, right? People
still barter though.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's where you would see a true free market. And it usually doesn't result in violence, right? Usually whenever there's something else where something becomes illegal is where you get violence in any sort of trade. Or if you have a state that's backing up your business, then you have kind of state policy that benefits you and then makes that trade differential of labor and value kind of fucked up, right?
Yeah.
It gets bad enough and you have people who become like, you have a gray market where people who are not properly licensed start offering that service for under the table or something.
Yeah, and by the way, Jack...
Like, I have definitely never walked someone else's dog in exchange for compensation without a permission slip for the state, for example.
Yeah. Jack in chat says it says about your comment, Phil, that it's exactly the structure we need. Federal government has way too much power. So... Generally speaking, here's the thing. This is the reason I pursued the park angle so much is because that's what these like border bitches normally bring up, like something local that they can use to myopically expound upon the issue. But like then they bring that to like the macro, to the cultural level at the border and immigration in general. So like an example is that, like, these people are the same people who will then back Trump, who wants a wall. How will that wall get built? Eminent domain.
Eminent domain.
And like a 100-mile constitution-free zone, and like stealing resources to fund the wall construction itself, and a variety of other things. Like the general gist of it is that the wall itself, the immigration controls, the funding of ICE, the funding of Customs and Border Patrol, all of this stuff relies on the same kinds of theft mechanisms that they claim they don't like. But then they claim they like them because they're keeping the immigrants out, they're keeping the criminals out, they're keeping the fentanyl out. They're keeping that Chinese technology like TikTok out, which is being banned on the 19th.
Yeah, but it's...
Is it actually being banned? Did they say it's banned?
Yes. The ban takes effect on the 19th. People are making their RIP TikTok videos on YouTube as we speak.
Wait, so... There's still like it doesn't actually go into effect though, right?
It goes into effect on the 19th.
But tons of people use TikTok.
Yes. Like, it's 10% of their base. But they didn't want to sell to America for 10% of their base.
People will just use VPNs anyway, so who gives a fuck? Like, but of course this is just a foot in the door so that they can further regulate the internet, which is why these morons pushing the TikTok ban. Look, these things, people who push shit like this never have any foresight. Okay, this is just a massive foot in the door towards regulation of social media and the internet in general. But again, people get all up in arms. Are like, it's being used to brainwash kids with Chinese propaganda. Okay.
And it's like...
That's eventually going to be turned on you, you fucking idiot.
And like that, but that's the thing, though. That's the real shit right there. Is like, it's the same shit of, but I'm a brown Indian. Don't hate VIVEK Ramaswamy.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the good ones.
Yeah. All the respectability politics just goes straight out the window when you realize that, oh shit, I fucking courted racists.
I can't believe the leopards ate my face.
Exactly. And so, like, and by the way, Jack in the chat says, you cannot govern California like Alabama without having civil unrest. Alabama like California. And agreed. But the same time, there's certain parts of Alabama you can't govern like other parts of Alabama without having civil unrest. It's not a matter of
Yeah.
state versus state. It's a matter of person versus person, and each person should be free to do what they want. And like Jack also says, the way I see it, deregulate everything. Our country was made for ideas to compete. I can sort of
Yes.
see that, but what I will
How
say,
well-
what I will say is that there should be regulations on an anarchist level that one could voluntarily agree to. For instance, like if you look at the back of something and it has a UL logo, it means that it was standards and safety tested by UL. And that was a regulation. In order to have the UL seal and UL approval on the UL documentation through the UL website, you have to be UL certified and meet UL regulations. But UL isn't a government organization. UL is UL. And, like, that's the kind of thing, and I've brought that up so many times. Like, you could regulate things on a very personal and private level just by people being like, yo, I don't want it if it's not UL, or some
Yes,
shit like that.
voluntary certification is a thing. It's still a thing in a lot of industries that have, as of yet, escaped state regulation. And people still want some kind of assurance that they're getting a quality product, so there are voluntary certifications that you can get. And then there's the matter of insurance and liability. Like, for example, say I want to like run an amusement park or something. Okay, so I want to be able to protect myself in case someone gets injured. So I need insurance to cover potential liability. Insurance is going to say, okay, we don't want to give a 6 to 7 figure payout though. So we're going to need to see some proof that these rides are actually safe. So before we'll sell you an insurance policy, we're going to need an inspector to go over and write up a detailed safety report, and we're going to need inspections every 6 months. Like, there will still be regulations of there will still be a type of regulations in a stateless society. Okay, you don't need the state to have a monopoly on these things. People still want assurances that they're getting a safe product or a safe service.
Exactly.
I mean, it'll probably be better actually, because most of the regulations we see now are usually ways to obfuscate risk, right? And then once they get the rubber stamp that this has been passed through some regulation, then people are kind of lulled into the sleep of safety over something, right?
And then go ahead.
No, go.
Oh, yeah, and then you also get protection from liability if you're rich and politically connected enough, like pharmaceutical companies who build the fact that they'll likely be sued into their profit model when promoting a drug and submitting it to the FDA for approval. Like, they could have evidence that something may not be as safe as they're pretending, but they expect to be sued, and they do the math and they decide that, okay, we're still going to make more money even if you account for lawsuits. Like, and these people never face any actual consequences. They might get sued for an amount that, again, has already been factored into their profit model.
Also, regulatory capture. Just like
Of course.
we know that the poor people that we're exploiting and need to keep their jobs can't afford to engage in the market with a certain amount of hurdles to get over to make their product or whatever regulatorily compliant. So we'll make these regulations. We love these regulations. Or we'll make these taxes. We love these taxes, so that the system will create this artificial floor above which the poor cannot rise, and below which we can grab, sometimes really talented people and force them into a mandatory labor pool for the rest of their fucking lives. Upward mobility is shit in this country. The productivity gap widens by the moment. AI scourge that is fucking everyone is replaced. That's the real replacement, is replacing all the people who are productive in those industries with a machine that is like usually created by a mega corporation, or like a fork of something created by a mega corporation designed to scrape and isolate and remove people from like the market and the labor pool, thus preventing them from ever being upwardly mobile in their classes. Like those sorts of things are all created as tools to like prevent the common person from getting to even a middle management level, you know, before they get even to the upper classes, keeping them on the lower classes, and then eventually outmoding the lowest skilled of them to homelessness, or being what amounts to what Elon Musk called a pet, living on UBI or some shit like that in a future like version of the government, or in the present version of the government, food stamps and a bunch of welfare. Like,
yeah, but the problem is that Elon Musk and people like Sam Altman have these tools and are using them to exploit. I'm not against the average person doing some image generation or some YouTube descriptions or whatever. With AI, I don't like the centralization. I don't like these, let's call them government subsidy recipients or tech oligarchs controlling everything.
well, I don't have a problem that extends to the level of you know, the rich doing something exclusively, because the common person normalizing that and participating in it creates the culture that enables that sort of thing to take root once the tech oligarchs are the ones at the helm. Like, those people only have success in these fields because the common person thinks it's just a funny way to generate an image or some text or a fun response. Or, you know, a way to improve their productivity by removing messy, like, menial work. It's like, that's the real replacement that's happening, if anything. Like, I think you and I probably could have a full-on debate about that at some point. But, like, the general thing that I was saying is that, like, that's, like, there's real replacements going on that, like, the tech and other oligarchs in this, like, environment would rather us not focus on. They would rather us focus on brown people overseas that are coming here, migrating, and getting, for instance, an H-1B visa to work in one of those tech companies to begin with. They would rather,
Right.
and ironically, a lot of these, you know, we will not be replaced people are replacing the kinds of jobs that they claim are being outmoded for them in STEM by getting involved in AI. So, you know, I think that that's one of the things, is that these people are acting against their own interests, and like not like taking their ideas to their conclusions. If you don't want to be replaced, don't enable any mechanism which could replace you at any point, or anyone like you, if you're trying to do this on sort of cultural or ethnic or whatever identity grounds. You shouldn't enable that. But so many of these people are saying, yeah, we need more people in STEM, and then they enable the kinds of technologies that are removing people from STEM.
Okay, but just to give a little pushback on that, because like labor unions throughout history have often been against advances in technology because they were afraid it was going to replace them. Like, the panic over being replaced by machines is not a new one.
But it's actively happening, though.
But what usually ends up happening is that jobs change, but they don't necessarily go away. Like, there was this whole pushback against like self-checkouts, which I hate having to stand at a checkout counter. I love being able to just scan my groceries and pack them however I want. But there was all this panic that, oh, it's going to put people out of work. No. What happened is things like curbside pickup became a lot more popular, and people who had been working at the checkout counter instead just got put to work like doing curbside, like putting together curbside pickup orders, which is way, in my opinion, like far more preferable than having to stand all day at a fucking checkout counter. Like if you're, say, putting together curbside pickup orders, you're at least allowed to say take a sip of water or stop in and use the bathroom if you need to, and just act human in general. Where, yes, standing at a checkout counter is a soul-crushingly horrible job. So I don't necessarily think this, like, oh, and then like just like in the science field, like, okay, used to be like my first boss was a boomer, first lab I ever worked in. Like, he would tell me stories about like when he'd be doing a cell growth assay, like he would have to basically camp out at the lab for 24 hours straight to take measurements of his cell cultures for 24 hours so that he could put together a growth curve. Now, okay, I can just drop my samples into a machine and have it automatically take concentration measurements every so often, and then so I can put it into a machine, then I can go home, do other things, spend time with my family, spend time on hobbies. Like, I don't have to do stupid shit like camp out at the lab. Like, I don't necessarily think technological advances are a bad thing. They change jobs, but they don't necessarily put people out of work.
What job is AI changing and not putting somebody out of work with?
It may make certain things more efficient so that workers can, say, focus on other things.
What would they focus on?
I think within the next decade, we're going to see the 4-day work week becoming a lot less common. Or, I mean, I'm sorry, a lot more common, because, like, there will reach a point with most companies where it's actually cheaper to have the building closed and not have to do things like run heat and utilities.
My rent has gone up. My rent has gone up $50 in the last year.
Well, that's currency. That's currency devaluation. That's
yes.
You over.
So how will less hours that they're getting paid less in total for factor in?
No, I mean the 4-day work week with the same salary, which is how it has worked. I don't know. I can't say for sure that like every company is paying the same amount, but I do know that some companies that have transitioned over to a 4-day work week are still paying the same amount, but they're saving money by not having to have the building up and running for that additional day.
Okay.
So I don't. Again,
do you think these mega corporations are going to do that?
Put some people out of work. I just think that people are quick to panic over it when it may not necessarily mean the apocalypse for workers.
Okay, but there's already a huge amount of these mega corporations, especially, and people that are less mega but still corporations, and people even below them who are saying we're laying people off, and also here's our latest AI tool that we're using, and those people don't get 4-day work weeks along with, like, you know, the same salary. Those people get laid off. That's what's actually happening. Like, it might be nice if that wasn't what's happening, if they were being, like, willing to be more ethical, but that's not what's happening. What's happening, and we'll probably have an entire AI conversation at some point, because this is a completely separate subject. I was mostly doing an aside. But, like, they're not doing that. They're not saying, you know, like, we'll give you the same amount of money. They're saying find another job. And then that person who, like, studied in that skill in that field and has been working in that field for a long time doesn't have that job anymore. The self-checkout being replaced by, like, Instacart, basically. First off, let me just say, my first experience with Instacart, not great. They
always forget something, and they always make dumb substitutions.
Yeah, they like undercut me on the amount of pasta that I was that I bought, and they charged me the same amount, and then they like gave me a pound of beef instead of 3 pounds when I paid for 3 pounds. And so I had
they'll refund you if you complain.
Oh, I did, and I did get a refund. But the point is that, like, even that isn't a great argument because it's not a one-to-one replacement. If I was in the store, I would have gotten the goods that I actually wanted, and I would have taken it to the checkout, and I wouldn't have had somebody who drove to my house with the wrong stuff and that I gave, like, you know, my money to before I even knew that. So it's, like, first off, that's not even a one-to-one replacement. And then second off, like, the job itself is, like, still in the same field. It's still, like, in the same building. It's still doing the same thing to take the goods and put them in somebody's, like, possession. But there is no direct replacement if you get laid off for AI, because the AI is taking the position you used to have, and you're told to go fuck yourself.
Yeah, but can I point to like a kind of a transformative moment in travel, right? Like there was nobody screaming like we need to justify maintaining all these like horseshoers, right? Because there was no people using horses for travel anymore, right? Those labor positions then shifted to like vehicles and maintaining vehicles and producing things that are necessary to maintain those vehicles, right? I think even if we transition to an era where there's like a lot of AI and a lot of robotics, that there will be positions and jobs that will then transition to that. The point I think is that the ethical use of that transition is where you probably would have the most I think, traction, at least in convincing me that something would need to be done, or at least market pressures would need to be applied to make sure that that transition to new industries is done at least in a way that is not cruel to the people that spent their lives doing it. Right?
It's already being cruel. That's the reason they needed to scrape the entire net for art, and images in general, because they didn't get the permission of the people involved.
But
they had to do passive scraping. Okay, they had, but the thing is, the product is objectively inferior. The product is objectively worse. If you get
but people pay for worse products all the time, right? Like people will buy a car.
Yeah, but the product is inferior, and people already buy inferior stuff, is not an argument against the idea that the person who made the superior product is being outmoded because people believe that they can get the same kind of product from a machine.
But they do, though. People buy cheap shit all the time thinking it's going to be as good as that, like, nice handmade good that I poured my heart into making for a month.
Yeah, but you know what you need? I can tell you how you could solve this.
Before you do that, I don't know whose phone that is, but that needs to stop.
I don't know what.
Who owns a phone anymore?
Yeah, jeez. What are those? I have AI do all my calls. And then I have AI dial.
I actually share a lot of Jeremiah's concerns about AI. I just don't I don't know how much I buy the idea that it's going to put people out of work.
It's already doing that.
I'm concerned about the high tech. I'm mostly concerned about the high tech surveillance state.
Okay, but it's already doing that.
AI girlfriends. It's like, hey, I don't need a girlfriend. I have an AI girlfriend.
But it's already doing that.
God.
Okay, but it's already doing that. You know, to say that you're not concerned about it because you don't know how much it's going to do.
I didn't say I wasn't. I said I'm not as convinced by that argument as I am about the surveillance state.
Okay, but you should be plenty convinced because it's already doing that.
Problem isn't what we got to do with AI is take it back from.
It was never not back. It's always theirs. I mean, maybe.
I feel
it's not really something that can be decentralized, I don't think.
Yeah, I feel if workers had unions, there's an AI union, and they take back control of their workplaces, like self-managed worker industries.
And isn't AI...
then we could find a way to use AI and robots, not Elon Musk is, to automate stuff and have more leisure and better production.
But they're probably not going to pay you to have more leisure.
Well, they are us at this. If it's
no, they aren't us. If we're trying to transition to this period, we still need to have the period where we acquire capital, and we're not going to acquire capital by using a tool that they've already used to sap capital.
They don't have to exist,
but they already do. So what we're going to do about that is we're going to go against their mechanisms. To simply say that in some ideal society they wouldn't exist and they wouldn't be controlling us isn't an argument against whether or not they are. And if they are, then that control mechanism is what we have to oppose if we're opposing.
Not necessarily making an argument that they're not. I'm saying the way to ratify this is simply the technology is going to exist.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not going away.
We have to
no
make
matter
a
what the market
decision.
pressures are.
Okay, cool. So if the technology is going to exist, it's not going away. So we have to figure out what we're going to do with that technology. Is the case? Then clearly everybody needs a nuke.
I mean, I do.
I mean, like mutually assured destruction.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I need one.
No.
I agree.
You can't put scientific information back in the box, right? Like once it's out, it's out. People have gotten used to it. There's not much you can do to stop.
Except we can personally move against.
I'll nuke New York.
We can.
Yeah. Well, we should have our own recreational McNukes.
We can personally. Oppose the cultures.
You violate my nap, I'm launching a recreational McNuke at your McHouse.
We should oppose the culture. Look, I get that y'all are joking, but what we can do is we can oppose the cultures. We can oppose...
I mean, I personally I'll spend money instead of hiring somebody that's going to use AI to make art for something if there's a project. I'm not going to hire that person.
So that
So there's choices that we as individuals can make. I think that's the biggest difference, is that like nothing outside of market pressures and cultural changes is going to do it. The idea that it's going to be regulated or somehow a redistribution of process is going to make it happen, it's not. And there will be robots, there will be probably generalized AI. There's not much we can do about it. It's just in the process from here till there, how do we shift the culture that the kind of introduction of these things ends up being positive, right? Like that it's not a overall net negative.
But that's the
Yeah,
thing.
and
We
that's
can't shift
through-
it through using it. We can't shift it through like saying, yeah, we'll actually, also do the same thing that's putting people out of work, and we'll also do the same thing that's creating this culture, but we'll do it in a way that like enriches us. We'll, for instance, launch an AI that's attached to a blockchain that's attached to a shitcoin and hope that shitcoin moons, so that we can make a massive so that we can make a massive amount of profit of
Well, that
like
was just a pump and dump scam.
with
They all are.
so that we can make a massive amount of profit doing the same sorts of things that take jobs now. That's not going to fix the problem. It's just going to put the people who benefit from the problem in different positions. It's going to put the same amount of power and the same kind of corruption in different hands. That's not a solution to the problem. It's just the problem in different hands. So, like, the solution isn't to like decentralize the kinds of things that are currently causing replacement. The solution is to encourage a better culture that is okay with integrating the kinds of people in present who need that kind of work. And that's the same kind of thing with immigration, which is the subject of today. We'll get to AI on some other day. But the general thing that I was trying to say is that the actual replacement that's happening here and now is being done by the people who claim to not want to be replaced. Those kinds of people are making the argument for their own replacement and for the technology and the people who are currently replacing them. That's why Elon Musk is such a big fan of AI personally, and that's why he hates immigrants, because he doesn't want these low skill people. He wants to automate away all the low skill things. And he doesn't actually understand skill. He even cheated his way to being a Diablo 4 leaderboarder. And like,
You do that.
you pay somebody to give you an awesome character, and then you pretend that it was yours.
But that's not even fun.
No, it's not. But it is a good way to elevate your profile among nerds so that they give you more cred. So like, that's the whole thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it doesn't help to change the hands of power, or to, like, if you actually oppose the results and the corruption that come from that power. What helps is to, like, actually understand and move away from that power. And that's what anti-immigration people don't like. They don't like the idea of actually having people compete on a level with them. They don't like the idea of, like, some, other human coming into their country who might be more willing to do the work for less pay. They don't like that kind of person coming in and potentially competing with their job. But when it comes time to take anyone else's job here, they have no problem with that level of corruption. They have no problem with seizing those reins of power. And that's the inherent hypocrisy I was mentioning.
Yeah, but and I would say the reason, the thing they don't really like is horizontal power structures, because if we had those, this doesn't become a problem. People don't know what those are, though, so I think they can suppress a lot of people into believing that, hey, this is just the way it has to be. They're convinced of that paradigm.
Also, we've got comments in the chat. Let me see if I. So actually, also I got to switch to live chat. I forgot to do that. We've got the AIs are unionizing. That's amusing.
Yeah,
One day. Oh God, what's gonna happen when the different AIs unionize?
that'd be awesome. That'd be cool.
We've got
Let's have an AI syndicate.
We've got deplorable Kulak. I don't want to work. I just want UBI. We need to elect people who will take the money from them and give it to us for free.
No.
I like your
Nice.
sarcasm.
That's a parody.
When the bully chimp bullies the others in the group, he usually gets eaten.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
Primstan.
Chimps are assholes, but well, actually, it actually varies. There are different chimp cultures between different chimp tribes. Like, yeah, some are a lot more, some are more egalitarian than others, and others are basically like, yeah, they've got like a warlord leading them, and
Yeah, you can be like a male chimp, just like boop, and be like, all right.
or you can be like the bonobos who every time, like, they just resolve all their differences by having orgies.
we've also got
yeah.
We've also got the same person saying, "Speak for yourself. I don't need meaning. I just need money." The Democrats want to give lower-paying jobs to foreigners. The Republicans want to give our higher-paying jobs to foreigners, and Biden gave our trucking jobs to foreigners.
Oh my God!
Well, I mean, this person is on the right track with hating both of the duopoly parties.
Yeah,
like,
like,
at least that.
Yeah, and I think this person is like sort of a long-term sub. Actually, I think this person's been listening for a while. So,
it's a guy from South Park. They're taking our gerbs.
But Jack also says that's why the ILA shut down all the ports last year. They were going to replace like 70,000 jobs with things like AI. So yeah.
Wait, Jack who? Jack who?
Jack don't do it.
Oh.
Yeah, no, Jack Lloyd's not here. Jack Lloyd would not consent to one of these discussions because he likes echo chambers.
He's cool, dude.
Dude, he blocked me for what I think is a pretty sad reason. But yeah.
Oh, really? Because he was one of those people who was part of the original Mises caucus and produced a ton of content for them, and then he and his wife were just unceremoniously banned. I think last summer. He'd been saying for a while, he wasn't he had some serious criticisms of the direction he saw it going, criticisms that I've also had, but yeah, I
think I had valid criticisms.
Yeah,
Jack's base.
I thought he was reasonable in some ways, but in other ways, it's like this guy is his analysis and is kind of shallow in a lot of places, but my interactions with him have been fine. But I've heard he's block happy.
No, he isn't.
See, I don't have a problem with any of the base levelness, like how deep it goes. Is that a prescription that he had written got utilized in a plank or a principal position, and then I tried to have discussions about why it was tone deaf in the current political environment that we're in, and that if it that his theories behind how to run kind of an anarchist model is perfectly sound, but to kind of unilaterally introduce that to the LP and then not even kind of respond to the criticisms other than buy my book to understand what it means. I was like, what do you mean? I have to buy your book to understand what it means? This is being represented for the whole party. And then at some point,
that's as ANCAP as it gets.
He seems like he's got decent takes on most things. I was like, why was I blocked for this? I was like,
I think he has undecent takes on a variety of things. Maybe I'll get into that at some point.
That's disappointing. Why would he block you for that? It was unclear if that he wrote that, but it was unclear if it was ever meant to be used in the way it was used.
That's my main
by
point.
The very people who kicked him out of their club, and now they want to use. I mean, it's not at all surprising that they would do that, but. Now they want to use his article he wrote for them after they kicked him out.
Jack's super base though. I talked to Jack.
So
we'll get him to unblock people, and maybe he can come.
Yeah, I don't have anything personal against him or even his philosophies. I'm not sitting here being my philosophies are better than yours. It's just more so this is how
I'll invite him. I'll invite him. I'll be like, come on, be an ANCAP man.
And that's the thing. The reason Jack blocked me was because I proved that Javier Milei, a man he idolizes, is very much like Trump, who he claims to oppose. And the last comment I wrote to him before I got blocked was, there's an AI police and surveillance state-shaped hole in your libertarian president, and I linked to a tweet that I had posted before that proved that. And so, the thing is, I'm not gonna. This ain't an anti-Jack Lloyd stream. We could do one of those, but I don't want to.
I mean, I just want to be a part of that. I'm not.
Yeah, right.
I'm not.
No, of course not.
I like Jack. I like Jack.
I like him. He's been very nice when I've talked to him.
But the thing is, what I'm trying to say is these so many of these kinds of things are the direct result, and that plank is one of them. That, well, not plank, but that ideas section that was allegedly written by Jack, is like one of those things. Like, if you're going to say that, like, the only people who should be invited here are people personally invited by property owners, that's garbage. The U.S. government did not ask for permission before playing regime change. The U.S. government did not ask for permission before bombing their countries. The U.S. government did not ask for permission before funding the people who did regime change and bombed their countries. The U.S. government did not ask for permission before engaging in cartel wars. The U.S. government did not ask for permission before any of the shit that they did that fucked up other places and made them want to migrate elsewhere from their homes. They didn't want to fucking leave. The Palestinians didn't want to fucking leave, but U.S. funded bombs that didn't ask for permission or need like the permission of a rich person to find their home in a Palestinian home and explode the whole thing. Those things didn't need fucking permission. So neither should a migrant who comes from one of these places that Western hegemony has fucked up.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another thing to consider while having the immigration debate. Like, once again, this all goes back to the state and the fact that in the absence of a state, we would not have the U.S. empire carrying out regime change operations and bombing foreign countries and creating the need for people to migrate here so that they can at least be in the eye of the empire as opposed to in one of the countries that it's actively fucking over.
So I think like the biggest thing that I had a problem with, like the kind of prescription that was written on the LP, was that it made that birthright citizenship go away. And I could understand it in a philosophical, like, citizens are only slaves to the state, but we exist in a very specific time, and the tone that it was presented on there, especially when there's not a book that you can read and go all the other musings of why that is a valid take in that particular worldview, it felt very wrong. And then the examples that were given for what it would take to have the luxury of even being represented at all in this kind of minimal state environment was the price of like $250,000 a person is what the examples were given on the principle. And so when I pushed him about it personally, I was like, do you really want a family of 4 to pay $1 million to become a citizen here? Even if they wanted to be a tax slave and they wanted representation in this very minimal government, that doesn't seem right to me when my family came here and I was able to get citizenship and they needed only like $25 to come here, right? And so that's where I go, it doesn't make much sense. And then again, like I said, I pushed him, and then the result was that if you have no ties to the United States, I finally got him to send me a screenshot of his paper, of his book, instead of me having to go buy it to read it to understand it. And it said, if you have no ties and you're over 26, it's $100,000. And I'm like, per person. I'm like, that's still like an exorbitant amount of money to like come here and then be represented by any minimal government. And then while you're doing that, the defined term on that page, the platform page, was saying that if you're not a kind of citizen's tax slave, that you have higher penalties whenever you commit a crime. So like you're basically either you're a millionaire and you get to be at the same class of people that are already citizens, or you're not. And so this is where I was like, dude, this is like the fact that this is the unilateral position of the LP without any even like philosophical musings about it is insane to me. And I was just trying to say, like, you're the person that wrote this. Like, can you see how this would be received? And that one person and one ideology shouldn't speak for all libertarians. And that pretty much is what I feel like got me blocked on there, because I wasn't personally subscribing to that, and that I don't think the LP should personally subscribe to like one person's view of these things.
Well, of course not. It should subscribe to the platform that's voted into place, and not what one particular person thinks that they know better than the membership body.
So that's
thinks should be our official policy.
So
I don't know.
So that's the thing. Like, I think immigration is one of those issues where boogeymen have been built up, where the foreigner, the scary, like, Indian who runs like some tech company, the scary, like, Mexican who's stealing our, quote, low skill jobs, the scary, like, like black person coming from Africa who's like, Haitians are eating our pets. No, they're not. And Haiti's not in Africa, but, migrants from there settled there, and that's why they're black. like Haitians are eating our pets. No, they're not. Haitian cannibal gangs. No, they aren't.
That's metal.
And like the whole deal is like they have to make shit like this up. It's not real. They never proved that Haitians are eating our pets. They never proved that like they're Haitian cannibal gangs. The closest they got was one guy who
They got some woman on drugs that ate a cat that was a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. But like in order to
But
the cannibal gangs, the closest they got was a guy who burned his victims alive, which is not great. But they have no proof that there's Haitian cannibal gangs eating people as a matter of their gang membership. That's bullshit. And like that. Oh, by the way, just to,
metal, though.
by the way, just to like put a nail in this, the guy who wrote the article that popularized the Haitian cannibal gang thing, he did it with AI. AI wrote that article.
It turned to be AI and like
Yeah.
Just remember you getting into this massive Twitter argument over it like a year ago?
Yeah, and
Haitian cannibal gangs could eat Chris Christie. Do you think they'd be able to?
That'd be a lot of like it'd take a lot of these Haitian cannibals. Like there'd be a lot of food.
How do I know what's real and what's not? Because I believe things once there's evidence presented, and there was not evidence presented. So if you can find evidence presented, I'm definitely down to hear it. But like, no, I'm not gonna.
Who are you responding to?
Somebody in chat. Also, like, just like the migrants are taking over this. The drug gang is taking over this apartment complex, and they're taking over Aurora, Colorado. No, they aren't. And the Hell's Angels are gonna ride to go deal with. No, they aren't. And you probably shouldn't talk about an actual gang and what they're gonna do if you don't want to get your teeth in.
I'm an actual gang. I know what they're gonna do. They're gonna have a new puppet in like 10 days.
Yeah, right.
I think they extort 330 million people, and they're doing a couple genos and an evil dude. But the CIA they did put out for a manifestation, so that's all right.
Well, the CIA also interrupted you saying those words, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, as long as like, the moment he started saying CIA, he suddenly got
DDoSed.
So
do you think there could be a school of anarcho cannibalism where someone's like, we should have sales tax, and you eat them?
Wait. Anarcho cannibals?
It wouldn't be a good idea. That's how you get prions. But like the general gist of it is like this immigration question is based on a bunch of lies. It's based on propaganda. It's based on people making property claims that they aren't willing to take to their rational conclusions. And like that's the reason that this whole MAGA thing blew up, because they were spreading a bunch of these lies for years in order to justify the Trump presidency. And now that he's in, the people who like bolstered their campaigns and shit, those people don't like that sort of person. And they're like, yo, you're justifying migration, Vivek? You're justifying migration, Elon? You're justifying migration, Trump? I thought you were cool. I thought you were one of us. Turns out you're just another globalist. And now Trump is like, you know, having designs on Greenland. Trump is having designs on making Canada and Mexico a part of the U.S. Trump is like literally an imperialist globalist, and he always has been. And this is taking the wool off of a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, why does he suddenly want Greenland? Like, what strategic advantage? How many people actually live in Greenland? I thought it was mostly uninhabitable anyway.
Militarily, it's incredibly important, and I believe there's also like a techno kind of somebody wants to form like kind of a techno country there. I can't remember which techno billionaire it is, but they want to create like a new society in one location, and Greenland was looked at one of them because it would be cold enough to help with like server cooling and like be more energy efficient. But I think militarily right now, because we have this kind of bipolar formation happening, it's probably mostly that they want to have another military base in the Arctic Circle that they have a strong control over, because that's really where Russia's been putting most of their positions when it comes to their military bases is
Okay.
like all along that Arctic ring.
I want a techno country too. We'll get a Vici to run it, and we'll have raves. And you can
Let's move to Greenland and just have it like start up a Greenland separatist movement, and then we can establish our stateless society there.
What if that's the case, can I take over Pennsylvania instead of a commonwealth, make it a syndicalist state?
Yes.
Yay. We're going to be communists.
Meanwhile, I support building a wall around the downstate region of New York.
I think
we don't want their kind coming up here.
I think
only wall I will support is the one around New York City.
And somebody here is saying they already have Denmark as an ally. Trump can probably already station troops there. Denmark is in fucking NATO.
Right.
So
but that doesn't
true.
necessarily mean that there's military agreements on where certain weapon systems can be stored.
Yet.
Right? Like, it's not a guarantee that they could have nuclear weapons docked there. And I believe we only have one water base for our nuclear submarines inside of that region by the UK. And so I think they really want a nuclear capable sub base in another position near the Arctic Circle.
It might be easier to do that, though, than it would be to annex Greenland, maybe?
Oh, I agree. You'd have to change the agreement, but then, I think there would be a lot of pushback from the population for wanting nuclear weapons there, right? Like a lot of countries say, no, we don't want your nuclear weapons based in our country, and my guess is that would also be an agreement that they have, right?
I have a question then, because here's the thing that I find interesting. I don't like either of these people, so I think like Trudoofus said, like, America will never be part of Canada and blah, 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 which I'm like, what? I actually agree with him on that. And then Elon's like, nobody cares what you think, you're not the governor of Canada. But my whole shtick is, aren't you part of Doge? Aren't you trying to make government smaller? How do you operate Doge and expand the governance sphere of the empire? It's like literally like saying, yeah, I'm going to, start working out and get healthier, but I'm going to map out every Burger King and McDonald's, for post workouts. To me, it's like a complete counterbalance. So you want to make the empire smaller, but you want more territories to the empire to be, because like, what do they think they're going to do with these territories? Just people like, oh, it'd just be a passport to go. You don't need I don't really need a passport to move through Canada now. Like, I just have an ID. Well, what's the big deal? Like, why do I, like, no one's giving me a good answer.
It's the weirdest thing, though, because they were so pro-border, and then all of a sudden now they want to dissolve all of them, but in the most, like, disturbing way possible, right? Like, it's not like
why would we want like if we're gonna have the same democratic or rather the same voting system, why would we want Canada there? That's a massive voting block right there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that Trump is like, oh, well, ally with me, will help fight the Marxists. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mexico's president is a Marxist. I'm anti-Marxist. But it was funny when she called it like, he's like, it's the Gulf of America. He's like, and she just said Mexicana. I'm like, nice.
Well, also, like, the other half of it is that, like, this is just another example of the globalist hegemony, like, sort of forcing itself. Because, like, Trump has been a part of that. Elon has been a part of that. And anybody who doesn't think so can suck my yakarino. The general fucking, like, gist is that these people have been jockeying up for that. And if you want something that might scratch your brain as a conspiracy concept, just consider that, Trudeau was considered okay with the establishment really, like, long time. And the only thing that really bumped him out of the equation was when he started to say, hey, Netanyahu, if you show up in Canada, we're going to arrest you. And now suddenly he's deposed. I wonder.
Yeah, it's also...
is that what had to do with his resignation, you think?
I don't know. but it was
I don't
damn
know.
close, wasn't
Interesting.
it?
It was nice seeing other countries follow behind that, but yeah, I
But
mean,
you know what?
obviously, it's nothing. Unfortunately, nothing's going to happen as much as it would be nice if it did. But
Elon is so pro-immigrant, he endorsed the ADL. Woo, what do they believe? Oh, they're kind of like Germany during a certain period.
Mm. So
I
they
mean,
might
everyone should
they-
ignore the ADL. But
They might wave to you a little differently. Let's put that. They
Oh,
wave
God.
up. They wave upward, not to the side. Is
So
that a
it's
good
great-
way to describe
It's
it?
crazy that it's like he is like has this huge now mechanism of controlling narrative, and now like every single one is like more and more authoritarian in the thing he promotes.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
promotes AFD, which is basically like a very like, you know, let's just say nationalist adjacent German party, and he also promotes a wide variety of, like, let's just say theorists of a certain stripe. And mentalities of that sort of thing, in order to keep people consistently afraid of foreigners.
I mean, he likes Tommy Robinson. He said free Tommy Robinson, who
And
to me is an MI6 agent.
and of
Or
course,
just
when he's called out for all of this stuff recently, he very specifically immediately started saying, you know what though, negative posts aren't cool. We're gonna start making sure that those negative posts don't get allowed.
yeah.
I mean,
What do
same
we
as
call
how
that?
like
Censorship.
suddenly became anonymous after he accidentally or he liked something embarrassing.
Yep, and like also of course
I actually prefer it that way too, but
and also of
it's
course
just funny that that's what it took for him to implement that feature.
and
But
of,
don't worry, guys. I'll tell you what, Phil. There's a party here to save us. It's called the Brub Party.
what?
BRUV.
he's talking about Andrew Tate's grooming party. So the general-
I did not know that's what he's talking about.
The Brub.
the general thing is like, and that just to, you know, say this because I can say it again. Elon Musk gutted half of Twitter's staff, and now the thing that's enforcing no negative posts getting like boosted or whatever, that thing is AI. He's using that because he like has replaced real human workers with AI, and the AI is now being programmed to like deboost that being censor, shadow ban negativity.
Isn't that just as Facebook's kind of moving? Well, supposedly, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
That Facebook is supposedly moving away from the AI enforcement because it's so unreliable. Like, maybe we'll finally at least not get like a multi-day ban because you called someone a silly goose or something.
Well, and that's the thing. Like,
Zuck's base now.
if any,
He's pretending to be, but is he really?
no, Facebook is a
Gotta
CIA.
get those subsidies, man.
Facebook is a CIA op. But
Of course
like
it is.
it was literally
Was the-
funded by the CIA.
Oh.
Like you
How
didn't.
come the CIA won't fund any of my social media, any of my startups?
They do. It's called AI. But the general
yeah.
the general gist of it is like, okay, we're probably headed into closing statements because it's nearing 2.5 hours. So we'll just like we'll give we'll start with Kareem, Rose, then Phil for closing statements, like 5 minutes apiece. And then I'll give my general gist.
I didn't get the APR rates on CIA loans. Like, can I just get one of those black box projects that disappear? I lost $1 trillion. I'm sorry. I don't know. Here's an F-35. It can't fly.
Yeah, right.
But we'll lose to Yemen. Woo! And we're not going to put all that money in Giga Chad, which is going to go and feel bad about it. Giga Chad and Peppy. Let's go. Anyway, I'm Kareem. You can find me on X, the thing that's being attacked by AI, Kareem6633, Anarch Unity, and also check out Attack the System and the Mad Liberty Project if you're on Discord. Yeah. Man, I can't say.
Rose.
Right. So, as I'm sure you all can see, this the immigration issue is a complicated one that I doubt you're going to get much libertarian unity on anytime soon. In any event, you can find me on most social media. You probably know how to find me by now. Check out the Liberty Test podcast on the New York Libertarian Party channel. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Oh, and real quick, Jack says, first time watching, that was a dope conversation. I subscribed. Welcome to the insane chant. See, and the thing is, I title these streams like an asshole because I want the people to come here and be like, oh, I don't like that guy, but I think we're pretty reasonable, usually.
So people actually like watching our conversations?
Yeah.
Yay! Woo!
I always wondered if anyone actually watches us.
Well,
You're probably not MAGA, man. If you enjoyed these conversations, you probably aren't MAGA. You just don't know
Unless
it
they're
yet.
hate watching.
or, well, you know, because that's the thing. My father is an ardent Trump supporter, but he's still really willing to have conversations with me about this. I don't think MAGA people, like, there are some MAGA idiots, but I do think, like, there's a significant enough chunk of MAGA people who aren't. So, like, there's a I think that the people who didn't like Trump, VIVEK, and Elon for these reasons were fucking idiots because they bought into a system that was obviously already rigged against their interests. But, you know, I don't think all MAGA people are idiots. I'm just an anarchist asshole who wanted this stream to attract people, so I fucking titled it like shit. So anyway, Phil, closing. Take as much time as you want.
Yeah, my name's Phil Ryan. You can find me on Twitter with Phil with 2 L's _REIN. I'm a part of a coalition that's trying to fix the LNC. So if you've kind of seen rot in there and you want to come over and you're really interested in coalitioning with people that have different ideas, as you can see, you know, there's multiple members within this coalition on this call. We disagree on a lot of things, but discussions remain very productive, and we try to keep these kind of discussions out of that coalition, right? Because the goal is not to try to force one vision on somebody. So I would invite you to come there. I would also invite you to get involved in your local affiliates if you want to see something changed. If you're afraid of putting your donation into a group of people you don't trust, you can always add bylines to it that says something like for ballot access litigation only, and that way your voice can still be heard in the party. And maybe for a wrap on the immigration thing, really my personal point of view has been that people are wanting to change the rules now when they've benefited, and you know that they don't want that same benefit to going to other people, and I don't really think that to be an ethical take in general.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just say there are a lot of people who are trying to weaponize you against people who are on the same level as you. This has been the same thing, whether it was Stalin or Hitler, whether it was, you know, Bush or Obama, Trump, Clinton, Biden, all these people have tried to constantly pitch you against each other so that they could, like, get you afraid of somebody on your level rather than somebody, like, actually in control. Reagan, for instance, like noted anti-handgun activist, and noted gun control like supporter, did it because he was trying to crack down on crime, and that crime was basically black people he was like scapegoating with like the entire crime problem. If you start to recognize that the general way that they rob you of your power and agency is by getting you to agree to rob other people of theirs who are in the same position as you, it starts to become a whole lot clearer what things like this are for. If they, you know, did the immigration thing, for instance, and got rid of, for instance, the 100-mile wide Constitution-free zone that runs around the furthest borders of the U.S., that might be one thing. But right now, they're not doing that. They're strengthening anti-immigration shit. They're strengthening the security state. Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard fucked you off on the FISA warrants.
She's pro-FISA now. Hey.
Yeah.
We should deport everyone that thinks XRP will hit $10,000.
The general gist is that Tulsi Gabbard is proof right now that, like Trump is proof right now, that those are not your people. if you value freedom. Those are not your people if you value reason. Those are not your people if you want even your culture preserved, your people preserved. And here's the thing, like, the way to preserve your people, the way to preserve your culture is not to bar other cultures and other people. It's to compete. It's to actually prove your worth. And if you're not willing to do that, and if you instead choose to blame other people, there's going to be problems with that, and they'll always be able to constantly pull the wool over your eyes and redirect you and misdirect your energies toward people down here when the people up there are the ones actually causing the problems. The people up there are the ones who actually have the money, the power, the territory, the control, the connections, the bloodlines that run back and give them all the money that they need. All the power that they need to do what they're doing to you on such a regular basis. And you could either choose to ignore that and to act like, you know, these people who are up at the top aren't puppeteering the fuck out of you and propagandizing you against people who look different, sound different, are different, fuck different. You know, you could either
How do they do that?
You could either do that, like, accept their propaganda, or you could, like, realize that the common person, that the people on the ground are your allies. The people within your class are your allies, and not the people who run the class above you. These people have propagandized you against foreigners. They've propagandized you against your neighbors, and they want you frayed. They want you constantly afraid. Patriot Act was a great example. All this, like, FISA warrant access, you know, the NSA spying that Snowden revealed, all of this stuff that was revealed under WikiLeaks and Manning and all these people who've constantly blown the whistle, those sorts of things would not be possible without their fear infecting your mind and making you okay with their control, because it's controlling those people. It's not. It's controlling all of us. And the sooner we realize that and get some solidarity up in this bitch, the sooner we can point our barrels up at them in their ivory towers and not at each other. Because
Like Luigi.
right now, we have nothing but our chains to lose. We have a fucked economy. We have a growing productivity gap. We've got a fucked healthcare system. We've got a fucked military industrial complex, a fucked intelligence industrial complex. We've got all of this, like, actual problematic shit that we could be fighting, and instead we're afraid of brown people. We're afraid of, like, trans people. We're afraid of Muslims half the world around, instead of the people in our country that are fucking us up here, now, forever. So that's my message to all of you. Recognize that America could be great, but what we need to do first is smash the fucking state.
Free Luigi.
Jeez.